This is the world's toughest podcast. Welcome to the world's toughest podcast, where we talk about any obstacle course race you'd like, as long as that's world's toughest mudder. Each week we talk to members of the WTM community and share stories of success and failure in the single greatest event in OCR. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the world's toughest podcast. On today's episode, Matt B. Davis brings us more from Nolan, Kombol, and Eli Hutchison of Tough Mudder HQ. This is our second of 3 episodes this week. Episode 7 was about Tougher Mudder New Orleans. Episode 9 will be about Tougher Mudder strategy and a course talk through with Wesley Kerr. That will be tomorrow. Before we get started, though, I want to thank you for your emails and reviews on iTunes, like this one by Molar Coaster. Great for newbie WTMs, 5 stars. A lot of great information in these podcasts. Fun to hear from other mudders about their trials and accomplishments. Or Fred Gzerba 08. Fred, I apologize, I mispronounced your last name. First timer WTM, 5 stars. 2017 will be my first WTM. Been listening for great tips. Hope it reaches 200 episodes. Fred. Or the one by Iguana John. Great for new runners or legionnaires. 5 stars. A great podcast that brings you the information you are looking for. For first-time mudders, you will have everything you need to get started. And for those looking to step up to toughest or world's toughest mudder, there is a ton of info to start you on your journey. Hey, you 3 guys, thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words. You can leave a review on iTunes or shoot me an email at willhicks@gmail.com. I've got a new way for you to participate in the podcast. If you call me at 302-RUN-WTM-8, 302-786-9868, you can leave a voicemail on the world's toughest voicemail. This is not Tough Mudder headquarters. I cannot help you transfer your registration from Saturday to Sunday. That is support@toughmudder.com. But if you want to participate in the show, call the world's toughest voicemail, 302-RUN-WTM-8, 302-786-9868. I may use your voicemail on the show. We are on the brink of the first ever toughest mudder in Los Angeles this weekend. The 8-hour race that serves as a qualifier to get contender status for World's Toughest Mudder. Although it's not a requirement to attend World's Toughest Mudder. You can attend World's Toughest Mudder in the open class without running a Toughest Mudder. But a lot of the guys who are running Toughest Mudder this weekend will be in Vegas in November. Tomorrow's episode will be with Wesley Kerr. It'll focus on planning for Toughest Mudder, strategy if you want to get 25 miles, if you want to get 50 miles. We talk about nutrition, we talk about wetsuits. We talk about the difference in elevation between the 2 loops. There's 2 5-mile loops. One loop from 12 midnight to 4 a.m., another loop from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. The second loop is much more difficult than the first loop. But today we've got more with Nolan and Eli from TMHQ. Matt B. Davis talked to Nolan and Eli last week when they were doing a bunch of press or promotional stuff to talk about Toughest Mudder. They did a live Facebook chat. They did our podcast. They did Matt's podcast. And there were some blog posts coming out also with more information. We've covered almost all the information, but this is the last bit of stuff that we have not talked about on our podcast. So I was able to sit down with Matt and talk about what he talked about with those guys. To hear Matt's entire conversation with TMHQ, search iTunes for Obstacle Racing Media. Click on their podcast. Look for the episode dated March 11th. So as Matt and I sat down to talk, there's a little bit of blowing smoke up each other's skirts at the beginning. Matt and I are friends in real life. We actually met because of his podcast. I emailed him and we were talking about random OCR stuff. And then we met in person at World's Toughest Mudder 2015. And we have kept in touch since then. I've actually written a couple articles for his website. You can find those at obstacleracingmedia.com. So this was a fun episode to do with him. Matt, thank you so much for being a good sport. It's kind of an unconventional format for one of these OCR podcasts. And you were a good sport about it. Before we start, one correction I need to make. During our conversation, Matt asked me, what's the most miles a woman has completed a World's Toughest Mudder. And I told him Stephanie Bishop did 85 to win this year. And that's a true statement, but I should have also said that Amelia Boone did 90 miles in 2012, and Deanna Blegg also got 85 miles at World's Toughest 2013. So my apologies to Amelia and Deanna. I regret the error. Let's talk to Matt B. Davis. Matt B. Davis is the co-founder of Obstacle Racing Media and the host of the Obstacle Racing Media podcast, the longest-running podcast in OCR by far. As we record this, Matt has recorded over 220 weekly episodes. Matt, thanks for coming on.
You sound like a podcast host.
I had a good teacher. So, Johnny Cash, someone asked Johnny Cash once who the best country western singer was, and he said, "You mean besides George Jones?" And if someone says like, "Oh, so what's the best OCR podcast I should listen to?" The only answer is, "You mean besides the Obstacle Racing Media podcast?"
Well, I appreciate that. It's something I am very proud of. As I said on the show many times, it is like my baby, right? It's like the fourth child, which I certainly don't need any more kids. But yeah, I'm quite proud of it. Having said that, I want to say that I've spent weeks on talking to, every time they snuck a little bit of news out about the 5K or the tougher or the toughest, I've been begging my contact to get me a call with Eli and Nolan, only to see you post an interview with Eli and Nolan before I even talked to them.
How great was that?
For you.
Oh, I was so excited when that happened. I didn't know if you'd already talked to them too. Like, I figured, anyway, I just got lucky.
No, I do. Way to go. Man, hard work pays. I mean, it keeps me on my toes. It was just a timing thing, you know what I mean? Every time a little piece of news would come out, I'd say, "Hey, you guys, when do we want to talk?" And they'd be like, "Oh, March maybe." And then finally it was like, "Okay, you can talk to them on Friday or Thursday," whatever it was. And then then that day, literally, I think I saw yours go up, and I was like, "Mother." Am I allowed to curse? Do you have a nice English lady saying it's okay to curse?
I don't have a nice English lady, but my mom listens, so I might bleep you.
All right. That's fine.
Hey, so I want to talk about the Tough Mudder competitive series. You've said for a while that you think Tough Mudder should time their first wave. What do you think about what they rolled out?
Some would say it's inevitable, but what I said to those guys was they just threw everything at once, right? They just quadrupled down on this stuff this year, because they usually kind of eke it out. You know what I mean? I think the first time they did Mudderella, there was one or two, and then they launched it the next year. We talked about how the Urban Mudder came out, and they never followed up with it. Even the half, they only launched it in a few cities, then it did well, so then they launched it in the rest. And now they're like, okay, here's the 5K, here's tougher, here's toughest, here's this Holy Grail thing, boom, all in one thing. So it's going to be very interesting to see who shows up. Because there's not a ton of money, my guess is it's not going to be, for tougher, that is, it's not going to be, Atkins and Hunter every week. It's going to be a lot of the second and third tier elites, quote unquote, except for, of course, maybe in certain cities. But I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see what it does for the sport.
Do you think Spartan should be worried?
No, not until they'd have to jack up the money and maybe make it a TV show, which they are doing with Toughest. So we're going to see who that brings out. But again, it's such a different vibe, right? A 45-minute sprint, or an hour and a half super versus, 8 hours overnight. It's a totally different animal. So we'll see.
What do you think about, someone said that since Tough Mudder is going after the Spartan market with the competitive angle, Spartan should go after the Tough Mudder market by making their races fun.
Well, I think I said before that they both struggled with this identity crisis for a while in the early years. Early on, it was, I think Will bragged only 60 or 70% completed. Spartan was saying, you're going to be judged and timed, and this is the hardest thing in your life. And they both kind of realized, wait, that scares away people, so let's rip people off the couch, quote unquote. And then they both sort of danced between that for a while. And then I think for Tough Mudder, it was 2015 where they were like, okay, best obstacles were all about camaraderie and teamwork. And they seem to be sticking with that. but now as I'm saying that, I realize that now they're adding the elite thing. I think Spartan is walking that fine line pretty well of, hey, it's going to be pretty hard, but we really want to get new people too.
Tough Mudder made a big switch, I guess 2 years ago when they first introduced King of the Swingers. Like ever since that obstacle came out at World's Toughest 14, I guess, like they've been all about the like that, then Block Ness Monster, and then Augustus Gloop this year. Like ever since that one obstacle or that one point in time, they've been real about the obstacle innovation.
Yeah, and I think it's almost like they took a step back first. If you remember, wasn't there the year that people were like, this is too easy, and Everest got less slopey, like it was a shorter half pipe or something? And like I remember in Atlanta, it was like I literally almost walked up it when in the past I could barely get up it. And the guy was like, no, it's on a hill. That's why it's easier. And I was like, no, dude, that's an easier obstacle. But yeah, then they just kind of figured it out. And they were like, okay, we're going to go nuts on obstacle innovation, which Joe famously said he didn't care about in an interview with me. But now they're starting to do a little bit.
Yeah, you know, I think it was an interview with you where Joe said, you asked him what his favorite obstacle was, and he said the bucket carry. The thing about Tough Mudders innovate, like you can't build a Block Ness Monster in your backyard. You can't build a King of Swingers in your backyard.
Right.
So I think I think the thing, like when I'm telling friends about Tough Mudder versus Spartan, like Tough Mudder's just fun. Like, yeah, it's hard, but it's more fun than it is hard. That's kind of
yeah.
So I have some audio clips from your recent interview, your most recent episode of your podcast. You talked to Eli and Nolan also, and you guys got into a lot of stuff that I did not cover in my talk with them. So I thought we'd play some clips and get your thoughts on what they said.
This is so exciting. This is so, as I said, next level.
You asked them, what do you call someone who does a Tough Mudder, Tougher Mudder, and Toughest Mudder in the same weekend?
A masochist, but we don't have an official name, but we would...
That's great.
We would think about it, and then Eli said Matt can name it.
So what are you going to name it?
So what happened was on the they had a live thing, which is, by the way, the other way that I got stumped was your episode was on, and then I'm going to interview them Thursday, and then they posted, hey, or Sharkbait goes, guess what, guys? They're going to do a live Q&A. I'm like, okay, so by the time I interview them, it's going to be completely moot, right? But I think I did a good job. I asked a question, so it's not moot. But anyhow, on that thing, that came up as a question, and Eli said, didn't Matt Davis from ORM call it the threesome? Which, by the way, I don't remember saying that, but he totally quoted me as if I did. Maybe that is what they'll call it, but maybe it's too much. You know what I mean?
Right.
They can't call it, they can't call it the trifecta, that's for sure.
I talked to Carlo Tapiz last night, and he said that he wants them to call it the Ultra Mudder.
The Ultra Mudder? No, they're not going to do that either.
It's got to be something they can put on a T-shirt too, like
right, triple tastic Mudder.
Something like that. That'd be terrible. You asked them about the team category at World's Toughest for this year.
So we've introduced a new team category, which we're really excited about. It's a 4-person team relay, and or 4-person plus. There's no cap on the team size for this, but it's a minimum 4. And the way the relay will function, which is a new format at World's Toughest, is as a team you'll have to start your first and last lap together. But outside of the first and last lap, you must have at least half your team on course at any given time. And the winning team will be the team that runs the total overall miles as a team, not individual mileage count. It's your team mileage towards the relay, and we'll still have the traditional team category 2-person plus team category. The only shift in pricing that's happened there is we're pricing down to the 3rd place level now because we've split that. So it's 1 through 3 for the team relay, 1 through 3 for the 2+ person team category. There's also likely going to be a national tie-in to the 4-person team relay category, which will be associated with the national teams that apply to run in that category.
So what do you think about the relay concept?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the nation thing is pretty cool. Like he said, didn't he say they're going to make special bibs?
Yeah, actually, yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But yeah, the 4 different types of bibs this year.
The relay thing, for those that don't know, they threw out as it was going to be part of the race. What was it, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
They announced it mid-year, and then like a lot of things, Tough Mudder, people complained and they took it away. They're like, okay, that's not really going to work for the spirit of the event. Meaning like you had to have at least 3 of the 4 on course, something like that. The first thing that I thought of that if I had to do it again, I would have asked them is, how are you possibly going to enforce that? Like, I think WTMers are pretty good at what is essentially the honor system, right? Mm-hmm. Because nothing is to stop you from walking around pretty much any obstacle at any time, but especially in the middle of the night, right? There's staff there, but like, what are they going to do? If you just walked around it, they'd be like, hey, what are you doing? You know what I mean? So when it comes to this, if you've got some team of 4 or 5, I've got to manage remembering who is on course at all times. I mean, as soon as someone gets hurt, that's going to go out the window. And like I said, we hope that people are honest, but it seems pretty hard to enforce. So I don't know. It just seems, I mean, don't you think so?
Yeah, I think it's Ragnar, the trail relay, has something with like bibs where the active runner on the course has the bib, but I've never run a Ragnar, so I can't really speak to that intelligently.
Well, they do, and that's good because you're wearing it and it shows that you clip the timing chips, right? So I guess, but again, like, are they going to go back and do that? Like, okay, here's the winning team. Let's go back and make sure 3 of their 4 passed every timing mat. I mean, it's actually a really good question to ask those guys.
Yeah, and I think I wouldn't be so worried about I mean, you're right. I think WTMers are pretty good about the honor system. More than enforcement, I think is just like accidentally forgetting stuff. Because like I talked to Neil Craver, and he told me he lost one of his entire laps because he wasn't wearing his timing chip. He just forgot to put it back on when he put his wetsuit on.
I think that's a pretty big one. I think I was always conscious of it. Even though the night when you go back in, like you kind of check your sock and like, is that thing still? I don't know. I was pretty conscious of it. I mean, have you done a lap or 2? Will?
Have I done a lap or 2? Yeah.
So, I know some people check like their stats like every time. I didn't. I literally went over there like once just to make sure it was working, and then like went at the end when it was all over. But yeah, I mean, anytime there's money on the line, cheating can happen, and I don't know. It just seems it's a little different than the top teams who are being watched pretty closely by like all of us out there and the cameras. Like, right. Okay, these guys are in front, so there's probably I don't know. It just seems like it's going to get wacky.
From teams, they talked about the new bib types at World's Toughest Mudder.
We'll have a whole slew of new bib types that are going to be on site. So the first thing that you'll notice probably is elite contenders will be in pretty snazzy elite bibs that they'll be wearing that'll be designed just for that category. Contenders will have a new contender bib type. We'll still have the classic World's Toughest white bib for the open category, and then the national teams will likely be running under a national flag bib, which will be exciting to see to help kind of break out the participant types on site, let people see who's where and who's from where, which will be really exciting.
So 4 different bib types at World's Toughest: elite, contender, open, and national team. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, can we just say that did you listen to Serial, the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you listen to any of the podcasts about Serial?
I actually did.
Do you listen to Undisclosed?
No, I haven't heard that one.
Which one did you listen to?
I listened to the AV Club had one, and then some random guy had one with just like wacky theories and stuff. Those are the 2 I listened to.
All right. Well, you've essentially turned this into we're now talking about another podcast. So, just realize that's what was happening here. We're now on a podcast talking about another podcast.
We're eating our own tail with the host of the first podcast.
Right. I mean, listen, whoever's listening now, you are officially an OCR fan. Do not let anybody take this away from you. You are dug deep in the trenches if you are listening to the Will Hicks podcast about the Mappy Davis Obstacle Racing Media podcast. This is awesome. And I will listen to this when I go for a run sometime.
I'll send you the audio, man.
At my own jokes. So I feel like this is the thing, man, and I don't know how to say this because I don't know if the word is innovation or creativity, but this is just one of those things that Tough Mudder seems to get right that sort of sets them apart. You know what I mean? That Spartan maybe doesn't do. Like, Spartan is more just the sort of, I don't know, generic brand, if you will. And like I said to these guys, they sort of keep stepping it up with cooler obstacles. With, one year they did the carabiner, totally creative. The golden. This is like a way to step it up yet again. Like, we already love their event. Here's another way to make it cool. They just seem to do this every year. They just seem to sort of keep raising the stakes, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is a cool thing. I think it definitely, everybody jokes about Contender coming through, right?
Right.
And now we'll actually see those people who most of the time don't say anything. It's usually the rest of us. They're like, hey, let these guys go because they're trying to win.
I've never heard an actual contender say Contender coming through.
No, but I've heard people say, excuse me.
Yeah.
Or, hey, we're trying to.
Yeah.
I heard a lot. Last year I heard a lot of, hey, I'm trying to get 75.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, all right, sure, as long as they weren't, a dick about it. But yeah, I just think it's these guys know what they're doing in a big way, and that's why everybody else is playing, catch up to Tough Mudder and Spartan, is that you've got some, they've got all the logistics handled, right? All the bullshit that people get wrong, like they've been doing it right already for 5 years. So then you can really innovate.
You asked them about additional obstacles or challenges at Tougher Mudder.
So I'm not going to tell you exactly which obstacles are going to be added to it. We're going to have a set of added challenges that we're going to put on course for participants to run through. It may be extended versions of existing obstacles. It may be added carries or added distance to certain other obstacles that we're going to be asking participants to do.
So that sounds like longer crawls under barbed wire, maybe longer hero carries.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of I think with the existing obstacle, they just get to do, like the 2.0 version or whatever. How they do that for Legionnaires.
Right.
I hadn't thought of that. That's kind of a cheat way to do it. I
don't want to see any bucket carries out there.
Well, they've done the cement carry. I doubt they would do a bucket. That's way too Spartan. I doubt they would do a bucket.
They've done what's the cement carry?
Oh, that was World's Toughest 2 years ago.
No, those were buckets. Yeah, they had like gravel, they had water, and they had sand, right?
Right. That was way too tough. But then they also had, so to explain to people, they said put 3 pounds of sand, 2 pounds of gravel, or 3 pounds of whatever in this bucket, and you would have to guess, and then you'd carry the whole thing, and then they'd weigh it. That was way too tough, as in WEIGH, because you were weighing it. Because you were weighing at the end. But then they also had a cement drag as a penalty for, I want to say, King of the Swingers, where you carried a cement block. And by the end of the night, they were all smashed.
Oh, like the cinder blocks?
Yeah, you did. Didn't you do that?
Yeah. You said cement. Yeah.
Right, cinder, cement, whatever.
You asked them about the Holy Grail.
So it's an in-year completion of a toughest, and World's Toughest Mudder. This one doesn't require perfect obstacle performance. If you run a tougher in year and you run a toughest and World's Toughest, you'll earn the Holy Grail at the end of the year, which will be an actual Grail. It also will be a Holy Grail finisher tee. Obviously, you have to wait till you run World's Toughest to finish your Holy Grail performance. But at the brunch, I think it'll be a really neat celebration for those select few that have made it through the year and have done all three, and can celebrate with a very cool Grail that proves that you've done something incredible.
What do you think about the Holy Grail?
Well, it's interesting because he said select few. Don't you think it's going to be pretty much everybody that does WTM?
I think they have like about 1,300 people a year that do it. Maybe there's going to be more because of the TV stuff. They're going to have at least 1,000 people.
Right.
And like if you're doing World's Toughest, why wouldn't you, and you want the Grail, why wouldn't you do one more race and then a regular Tough Mudder? Like,
yeah, I think I should have said that. I don't know. I don't think it's quick on my feet, I guess, as I should. Because, like, yeah, that brunch, everybody's going to – well, and the brunch usually sells out. So what are they going to do there? Just like the other 800 will have to get it later? Or they'll be lined up around the block. You can't eat this delicious breakfast, but here's your Grail.
Yeah, and they need to have them at the site because like with those T-shirts they sold at the brunch this year that took – some people are still waiting to get their T-shirts. I mean, it's a cool concept. Like, who doesn't want a shirt with their name on it with how many miles they did, you know? But right. They just had some trouble. At least I think the international guys especially have some trouble getting them. I'm sure like they'll know the numbers. Like they'll know, okay, this many people have done toughest, and of those people, this many are signed up for World's Toughest. So I think they'll have I think they'll be ready for it. I just think it's going to be way more than a select few.
Right, and then this also brings up the question of the black headband, right? So if I hurt my foot on lap 2 and I sit in my tent all night and I'm like, I'm just going to get my grail, man. I came all the way out here, right?
Yeah. Especially because they've said that for tougher mutter, you don't have to have the 100% obstacle completion. So what if you don't have 100% 24 hours at World's Toughest?
Right, because there's that question every year, right? Like who deserves one? The person that sat in their tent half the night and comes back out in the morning and gets their black headband, the people that only stayed up all night, blah, blah, blah.
It'll probably come down to, run your own race, and it means more to you, and so people always tend to say. You asked them how the counting would work for Legionnaire status.
It is per event day. So if you run 2 on Saturday, that still counts as 1. But if you run 1 on Saturday and 1 on Sunday, that counts as 2.
What about tougher or regular and then toughest at night?
Still counts as 1. As long as you're doing 1 day.
Okay.
I'm not flexing. We're not flexing on that. Still 1.
They were pretty emphatic that you can't get more than 1 event day per day.
Right. I think that was like 6 years of that question frustration. Like they just enough already. Even though I think you should get credit for 2 if you do a tough mutter in the morning and a toughest at night. I think you absolutely should get credit for another one.
I totally agree. If you do a tough on Saturday, a tough on Sunday, and a toughest in between, absolutely, that's 3 events.
But they're saying, I just think they're tired of the argument, and they're like, enough, it's done. But even having said that, right, people, the question will come up. People will say, I heard this on Matt's podcast, and they said this. They're like, I don't care. I still, you know what I mean? It's like people don't care.
Yeah. Last question. You asked them about the $50,000 bonus prize for a man hitting 110 miles and a woman hitting 100.
I've heard Ryan say he could hit 110. I've also heard Amelia say that she could hit 100.
Do you think those targets are going to go down this year?
Well, so there isn't one for the team this year, right?
No, nothing for the team. I mean, there's the regular, I think first place is $20,000. But there's no bonus this year for the team.
Right, so one of us should get on the phone with Atkins. You probably already reached out to him and find out. I think the year that Ryan hit 100, he stopped, right?
Yeah. He had Pack. I think he had Pack bearing down on him, though, didn't he?
No, he was a good 2 laps ahead, and that's why he knew he could stop. Pack ended up with
like 90.
90 or 95.
Yeah.
But he stopped at 100, and that was a Jersey course, right? So is he that much better now that he could catch 110? I mean, he knows. He's probably done the math pretty well, right?
Did you see him and John on their last lap this year?
I don't think so. Were they skipping or something?
They were just strolling. Like, it was like a victory lap. Like, they weren't... I mean, they were probably going faster than I was, I'm sure. But they weren't, like, running like they were lap 12 or lap 7. They were just kind of,
right.
Nice 12, 13-minute a mile pace. So if they wanted to, I think they could have squeezed one more in.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds... it's like one of those things that you think it's never going to be done until someone does it. And then it's like, well, then will they jack it up to 120? You know what I mean? Like, it certainly makes it interesting, right? Especially if it's like, if Ryan's ahead, assuming it's Ryan or Trevor by a long shot, and it makes the race boring. It's like, well, they're going to win, so this is boring. But then it's like, ooh, are they going to get to 110? Yeah. So I think he could, but who knows?
What do you think about Stephanie or Amelia going for 100?
What's the best so far for a woman? 70?
Stephanie did 85 last year.
Oh, she did 85?
And she did a cartwheel in the finish line shoot, so she still had some in the tank.
I did see that. I did see that on the TV show. That seems less likely, right?
Yeah, Amelia was talking like if she was there, if she was healthy, she was going for that orange jacket.
They probably both have the will to, right? Like the will to do it, but could their bodies hold up?
Right.
I mean, Amelia's not even racing yet, right?
No. She's planning on coming back, but I don't know what her first race back will be.
Right. I know everybody asks every 5 minutes, so I try not to bug her with that stuff. But you should have Stephanie. Have you had Stephanie on yet?
I have not. She's gone for 6 or 7 days. We're going to talk when she gets back.
I have a question for you.
Tell me.
Do you think you can keep this podcast up for 52 weeks a year?
I don't know if I'm going to do 52 weeks a year. I think I might do 2 or 3 weeks, like from now till World's Toughest, do 2 or 3 weeks after World's Toughest, and then kind of take a break until maybe 2 weeks before the season starts again in March-ish. So I'll take like January, February off. So maybe like, I don't know,
right.
42, 44 episodes a year. But, I do it at night after my kids are in bed, and people are happy to talk. Like, I've had people contacting me like, hey, I'd love to share my story. And everyone's been real supportive, so.
But yeah, I certainly applaud your efforts because I know how hard it is to keep this thing cranking. I also appreciate you. Like when I broke my Friday streak, you were the first to tweet about it.
You had a good one going, man.
I know, and now I've been super late, right? I did Sunday, I did Saturday. It's been crazy.
Yeah, I don't want to bug you about it anymore, but I'm watching.
No, I know you are. And I've mentioned you when I put it out.
I've seen that
on a few occasions.
Cool, man. Are you running World's Toughest this year?
I am going to go back to, although I like that Holy Grail, I think I'm going to go back to covering until it moves to a new location.
You think next year, new location?
Yeah, unless they don't. If they go, if in 2018 it's Vegas again, maybe I'll do it again. Like last year was like, hey, if I can get 50, I can kind of hang them up for a while,
right?
And go back to just covering. So yeah, I feel like if they move it, great. I'll try it again. But if not, who knows? I'm not planning on doing it this year. But anything can happen. But I'm not planning.
Special thanks to Matt B. Davis for appearing in this episode. If you guys want to hear more from him, check out his podcast, the Obstacle Racing Media Podcast. Lots of Tough Mudder and other OCR content. He's got 200 and some episodes for you to sift through. There's actually a lot of good content with Ryan Atkins, Amelia Boone, and others talking about World's Toughest Mudder over the last few years. Don't forget, if you call 302-786-9868, 302-RUN-WTM8, you can leave your name and a voicemail at the World's Toughest Voicemail, and I may use it on the show. Tomorrow, Wesley Kerr talks about Toughest LA and specific strategies for that course. Thanks a lot, you guys.